All right, everybody. It is just 1 minute past 1 o'clock, so I'd like to start today's webcast. We're excited to have with us today our partner Intelledox, and we review SharePoint document automation and e-forms for financial services. So I'm Joe Gig Werks. I'm the managing partner of Gig Werks, and with me today is Michael Cliff, who's president of North America and Europe for Intelledox. Today's presentation, we'll talk a little bit about Gig Werks, some of our work in financial services, and specifically document automation and e-forms in SharePoint with a demonstration from Michael. So about Gig Werks. We began the firm in 2002. We've been a Microsoft Gold partner since we began the company. We've been field managed since 2004. One second. I apologize to everybody. I did have to sneeze. Sorry. Those transitions still keep bugging me. So we've been field managed since 2004. Field managed partners, a very small percentage, something like 0.5% of gold partners, no less, are in fact field managed. And what it means is that we are recognized early in our company for both technical excellence and client satisfaction. With that, we've ended up working very closely with Microsoft, giving advanced training on their products, that's specifically SharePoint. And with the last 3 iterations of SharePoint, we've been trained a full year prior to the release of these products. We ourselves have been running SharePoint 2013 through last year. We won Microsoft Best Technology Partner last year, running in our region. And our market focus is from 100 seats to 150,000. While headquartered in New York, we do have clients across the United States. Just a little bit of why we think we cut above the rest. Why Gig Werks as it relates to SharePoint. For one, it's all we really do. It's about 98-99% of our revenue is around SharePoint. Again, referencing that field managed program. We've had advanced focus on SharePoint since 2003. We've already helped customers move to 2013, and our expertise is on the full capabilities of SharePoint. It's no small thing to me, because as it relates to SharePoint, you're buying those 6 pillars, that capacity across that entire platform. Without that breadth and depth of understanding, we do not believe that clients get the full value out of SharePoint. And additionally, as we work through the last 7 years with our focus on SharePoint, we've also come to work with some of the best and top SharePoint ISVs in the channel, including Intelledox and Intelledox, a whole long list. We do have a number of quick start offers and other webcasts and events coming up. We have a 3-day staging and development workshop. This is very popular. This is very useful for our clients, especially when you get to these release cycles. As you start looking at 2013, even if you're an 07 or 2010 user, it's more than handy, shall we say, to understand what the feature sets are in 2013, get an appropriate staging environment up, and work on some use cases in terms of POC and a hands-on workshop. We also have quick start offers around business intelligence, branding, connecting to line of business systems, as well as offering advisory services packages. In terms of upcoming events, we have a webcast tomorrow, in fact, the 24th, about what's new in search in 2013. We have a lunch and learn with Intelledox coming up on June 20th, this coming month. A conference will be at the SharePoint Fest in DC in August, as well as SP TechCon in Boston the following week. Very close to introducing Michael and getting into his demonstration today. But we do want to just pause, as we typically do when we do these co-sponsored events, to pause on what it is ISVs, what ISVs are, and how they work within that ecosystem. So Microsoft creates a platform, creates a baseline package. And, the old adage, 80% of what you need, maybe 90% of the box. But within that platform, despite its power and its magnificence, there are a number of functional gaps, if you will, that third-party companies have come to recognize, both horizontally across business unit function, as well as vertically, say, by financial services, so architecture and engineering. And ISVs play this critical role of really defining solutions that really reduce risk and subsequent investment in cost and represent a high degree of maintainability on solutions to extend SharePoint to the specific needs of, again, a department or an industry. On the far right of that equation are SIs, and that's what Gig Werks is. We're a systems integrator, nomenclature, if you will, and the role of an SI is sort of like a combination architect and general contractor. We help our clients architect the solutions that they need for their departments and for their users, and as part of that design phase, we'll help source out and identify third parties that will really do the trick, as it were, and represent a high degree of value to our customers. With that, you have Intelledox, and I'll let Michael go further into Intelledox. And Michael, just tell me when to click the next slide, and I shall do so.
Thank you, Joe. Just checking that you can hear me okay. If you can let me know you can hear me, I can assume everyone else can hear me as well.
Yes, I can hear you, Michael.
Thank you, Joe. And for everyone attending, I appreciate you taking out the time in the day. Just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to do today, we're going to give you a 30,000-foot look at Intelledox and how it can assist in document generation and smart web forms for organisations around the financial services area. When we talk about doing such things, we ask people to imagine that they can automate a number of the functions or low-level tasks such as dragging and dropping, cutting and pasting to create their documents, work with a dynamic wizard which will prompt for import or selections that will help in deciding what content and what layout and what images may be included in the document. We really look at automating and personalizing communications at the same time, which sometimes is a hard thing to, I guess, to imagine. So as we get to actually look at the product, that will probably make a bit more sense. But importantly, Intelledox's product Infiniti, which is what you will see today, is a commercial off-the-shelf product. Once it's installed, you have a working product. There's no code required to make it work. There's no custom forms. You can design your own look and feel of the wizards and the e-forms. And there's no version lock-in for using Microsoft Office products, and we use Microsoft Word as a back-end editor. So you're not reliant on it being the latest version of Microsoft Word. It can be back to 2007, for example. And thanks, Jay. You can click on to the next one. Intelledox is built around I guess, a rules engine. We very much focus on what the business process is and look to define business rules around that business process to help generate a document or an output at the end of the day. The important thing is you can use existing Word documents that you may already have, or you can lay out your own document templates within Word, of course, and all the features that are available in Word are available to you, and it makes it quite secure. So it's quite smart, very powerful behind or under the hood, but quite very simple to use. Thanks, Joe. We use a drag and drop design tool, which you'll see a little bit of today. The whole focus of Intelledox is it's a web interface, it's a web tool. So for an end user who may be using it, you only require access to an appropriate URL address, and then you follow prompts. We actually don't provide training for end users to use Infiniti. It's very simple because it's your business process. Because it's a wizard type approach, it's very much driven by providing prompts and assistance in how to answer questions, what to select when you've got a selection box to select from, and as you go through that, an actual wizard may grow or shrink depending on how questions are answered. And as I said, we use Microsoft Word for our document layout design. Thanks, Joe. So this slide is just giving you a graphical look at the three main parts of Intelledox Infiniti. One is the inputs, so that's the wizard-driven side of it, where you are asked questions and you are asked to input information or select from drop-down lists or select radio buttons to move through the wizard. We can draw information either from that manual side where an individual is actually entering information or selecting. It could be that we're drawing information from existing line of business applications, such as a CRM, an ERP system, so that you can look to reuse what you've already have in your organisation instead of reinventing the wheel or retyping again something that you already have. We have outputs, so you can produce to what we call multi-channel output. So it could be a Word document, it could be PDF, it could be an email, it could be HTML, it could be XML to be used down the line, or it could be a file to go to a printer in the case of a mass printing project that you may have. In between that, and what determines how we're going to transform the inputs into the output, is the Intelledox server. This is the business rules. This is where you define the business rules and apply the business rules. This is our magic, and you'll see a little bit of that in the actual presentation today. An important thing to note that this could be a fully automated and scheduled process. We have a number of customers whereby they're drawing information from their ERP systems and or CRM system, and at the end of the day it's a scheduled event that happens without any input from an end user, and normally it's for those high volume type activities, which could be production of a regulatory report at the end of a month, it could be the production of invoices, or it could be production of policy documents, for example. Thanks, Joe. Just to give you a sense of how some of our customers use Intelledox, and hopefully this shows that there is a lot of flexibility in how it can be used in an organisation. So you'll get to see a sample of a statement of advice in this particular demonstration, but we have banks who are using us to help with their wealth management proposals. Most organisations that are using Intelledox also use it to assist with their contract generation, whether that be a contract with a supplier or in fact a HR contract and letter of offer that they're supplying to their employees and potential employers. Lender documentation, general correspondence that's going out of the organisation, statements of work, and a number of others there that you can see. I guess the thing to take away from that slide is really when it comes to generating documents or using Intelledox to communicate with your customers or communicate internally, it's only really limited by your imagination, because you're the one that's defining the business rules and defining the output at the end of the day. Thanks, Joe. So when we are talking to organisations about how they may or where they may get usefulness out of a tool like Intelledox, we often ask questions like, what document is taking you the most amount of time to produce? What documents or outputs do you produce that have errors in them? We'll ask those questions because what we're looking to do is try and mitigate the risk. What document generation activities are you drawing information from different data sources from? And where do you actually have information that may be added or removed based on a particular business rule? Again, I'll just reinforce, if you're looking for a system which is not only going to automate and reduce time and reduce costs, one of the things is that an end user, which is normally a number, that are using Intelledox doesn't require any training. And is that something that is going to save you time as well, particularly on the rollout side of things? So, thanks, Joe. This is a graphical representation of some savings that we developed over the last couple of months with some customers. And it really is to set the scene of looking at this particular graph. It's where an organisation is printing out and mailing the majority of its general correspondence, for example. And this is based on about 5,000 letters per month. And it gives you an indication that most organisations look at receiving an ROI of around about 3 months. And then they really start to reap the rewards of the savings on what they used to do. So if, for example, the cost is around about $2 to $3, sometimes higher than that per document if you're printing it and sending it via the mail. Some of our customers have received savings of up to about 90% of that. So once they're using Intelledox, it gives them the opportunity to now generate electronic documents, actually transmit them electronically, save on printing, save on postage costs, and it doesn't even take into account the potential costs of actually having that infrastructure in place to generate a document at the end of the day. Okay, Joe, I think that was the last of the slides, so you need to give me presentation status, and hopefully I know how to work off of the slide meeting.
Yeah, you should have come in on the presenter one, no? Yeah, you're a presenter, Michael, so just go to content.
Okay. So I'm looking at it now. I'm sorry?
Go to content, share.
Okay.
You have a program on your desktop, which will be preferred.
Yep. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully what you're seeing now, and Joe, you can let me know, is a web page entitled Infiniti Produce.
Good, Michael.
Thank you. Okay, Infiniti consists of 3 modules, and we're going to show you a couple of those. The first module, which you can see on the screen now, is what we call Infiniti Produce. Because it is a web application and this is a CSS style sheet, this can actually be reskinned to suit the colours, the corporate colours of your organisation, or however it is that you set it up, if in your intranet or internet or both. So what you're looking at is how it comes out of the box, but this can be reconfigured, and Gig Werks can help you along that line. We then have Infiniti Manage. That's typically a systems administration area where you set up users. I'll show you briefly what that looks like, and I'll show you a couple of key areas. And then we have Infiniti Design. And Infiniti Design is where you have fun. That's where you tend to take a business process and apply it into Intelledox, write business rules, so that what you will see initially from Infiniti Produce is what you're actually designing. You're designing that look and feel of questions and answers. You define the layout that you're going to use in the output. And I'll show you a little bit of that, because that's where you actually go to, or potentially you go to, maintain the system on a long-term basis, or you may use Gig Werks to do that. So in Infiniti Produce, as an end user, I'm an administrator, or I'm a global administrator, so I'm getting to see everything, but you can restrict access via security or roles or access rights to different projects. So to start off, we're going to actually look at how I might complete an employment contract. So on the left-hand side, I'll just select an employment contract, and that will now bring up the wizard that has been designed to pull information from a user in putting together the employment contract. The thing I like about this is I'm not the world's best typer, so I'm not actually working in Word at this particular point in time. What I'm doing is personalising the information that will be put into a contract, a HR contract, to be sent out at some stage in the future. So please bear with me. I'm actually going to use a recent file. You don't want to see me type. So I'll just click on the employment contract for MDC, and you'll notice now that there is now information that's been included. Now, since this is a wizard, you follow through the process, and I will only get to see what I need to see. But we can have radio buttons here to, in this case, use the default ABC consulting details, or if I select the other radio button, I can actually define the office and the address of ABC Consulting that I want to use in this particular case. I'm just going to use the default and then move to the right hand side, and a staff member would start to fill this in. It's already pre-populated. It may be that I want to use the name David as opposed to Michael. But I also want to show you that we have validation and prompts throughout the process, so that if I had not completed the employee last name and click next to move on to the next screen, I actually then get a prompt to say this is a required question. These prompts can be quite simply that, or it could be information of how to complete that, an example of that. But that is in the configuration of Intelledox, how you use your business process and how you want to represent it to your end users. So we'll actually say it's David, and we move on to the next page. So the next page is now split into two sections here. There's the terms of agreement, including the contract date, start date, and employment type. And I've set up some tabs to gather further information. Now, we can use tabs format for like information. Often it's similar to saying what is your address and then what are your contact details. Again, that is configured by the person who's designing the layout as well as how it's going to represent it. And often it will follow what the business process is or what it was, so it makes sense for an end user. So we'll actually use a contract date. We'll say it's today. So I can just type in today, I could type in tomorrow or next year, or I could in fact type in Christmas. And the start date, I'll actually use the date picker to use a start date, and we'll make it 2013, and we'll make it May the 30th. The format of the date can be, it's currently in Australian format, I think, or UK format. It can be set up so that it's in normal US format or North American format. I then have a choice in the employment type. I have a drop-down list to select either full-time, part-time, or casual. So this is doing two things. One is it's denoting what type of employment I'm going to employ David Cliff under. The second, and probably the important thing as far as saving time and improving accuracy, is we have a concept called a content library where I'm going to draw information that is relevant to the full-time, part-time, or casual. I don't have to worry about the appropriate clause. It could be something to do with terms and conditions, which often are different between different states or different countries. And just by making a selection of which state or country it will bring in the appropriate terms and conditions. So I'm going to select this person as full-time, and I proceed through the process. Office branch is Sydney, just so that it's not total smoke and mirrors, so to speak. I'm going to select the office branch will be Perth, the department will be operations and support, and we'll actually make the floor manager so Higgs. And I proceed to the next page. Now the next page is telling me that I have actually finished the process of selecting the information to be put into the HR contract. I've also have it set up as a rule that it will say it's an employment contract and it will pick up who the contract name is from what I have entered. So you start to use that concept of select once or enter once and use many times, even in the process of creating a file name. I could save the answers for use at a later date, as I could save that particular project in the middle of it. It's not uncommon, as we would all know, that you're in the middle of doing something important and the boss comes and says, can you come and speak to me now? The last thing you want to do is close down the application, but you have the ability to save it with Intelledox so you can come back and go back to where you were up to, rather than restart the process all again. So we're going to generate the document now. So this is going away and it will open up what I have set this up to as an output. In this case it's a Word document. As I said before, it could be a PDF, it could be both. It could be an email, or it could be some XML to go down the line. So we'll just have a look at what this employment contract looks like. So we'll open it up. And we'll enable the editing on it just so we can view it a little bit clearer. So Joe, just let me know that you can see this fine, that we've got the employment contract up now that everyone can see. I'm going to assume with the no answer that you're seeing it. So we now have an individual full-time contract, so we selected full-time as the employment contract between ABC Consulting and David Cliff, and it's been generated on the 24th of May. That's the date of this contract. And as we go through the contract now, you'll notice on the next page we now have ABC Consulting, the default details, and we have the full details of David for 36 McLean Street. They're the details that we entered in. We've now used David Cliff's name twice. Even I haven't had to type it twice, it's automatically been placed into that. The agreement is going to start on the 30th of May 2013. So what we're doing is actually going through the process here of, we had a layout which was designed in Word. We have created rules to use certain information and bring in information and place it within that template and that layout in the appropriate places. So you see here we have the employment clauses for a full-time, that's 36 hours a week, and the conditions of a full-time, and the position reports to Joe Giggs. So what we're trying to do is actually remove those long-term, low-level tasks or low-value tasks, such as dragging and dropping from previous documents. I now don't have to worry about what the standard clauses are. They are being maintained. All I need to do is personalise it by completing that wizard. And that's your HR contract. To give you a sample of someone using Intelledox, particularly for a HR contract, is Qatar University. Had a process that to produce a contract, it took them anywhere between 1 to 2 weeks, mainly because they had to have the clauses that they were including in their contract continually checked by the legal department. That process now takes, on average, around about 5 to 10 minutes, because the legal area is actually maintaining the clauses to be used by the HR staff within the content library, so that when they go through that process that you just saw, they're already using pre-approved information, both in the template itself and also for the clauses they're bringing in. Okay. You just need to keep me on time, Joe, too, please. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go back and have another look at the front page of Infiniti Produce. I just want to show you something that's a bit more complex. I'm not going to go through and show you. I just want to show you a bit more complex form. And it's a statement of advice. So here we have, this was actually being set up for a company back in Australia, and it's being used by all the financial advisors that they employ, that they either contract or employ, and it's somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000, are now using Intelledox to develop their statement of advice. What used to take 7 hours and about 3 people to actually put together now takes between 20 to 40 minutes, and it's one person having interaction, and the 40 minutes major or extreme length of time is normally when it's they're entering a lot of information. But again, down the left-hand side, it gives an indication of the different types of information that a financial advisor is going to be asked about. And I'll just use one of my recent files again to pre-populate these fields. And I'll just look at a couple of different solutions just to show you how this particular set of information can increase and decrease depending on how I answer questions. So I know I will need to change the date of the contract to today, otherwise I'll get a message up. And then we go through and we can select the financial advisor details. And then if I look at insurance or investment, at the moment, is the statement to include investment advice? And you notice it's got investment risk profile. And does it include insurance advice? And on the left-hand side, we have 2 pages for insurance and insurance additional. If I click no, those pages now are removed. And if I said no to investment advice, the investment advice page is now removed. This is all about ensuring that you only see what you need to see based on the rules of how you're going through the process and how you are answering questions. If I look at client details, another sample of that is at the moment, do I want to include a spouse in this statement of advice? It says yes. So you'll notice here there is a tab for spouse details for a spouse to enter in the data, for the advisor to enter in the spouse's details. But if I said no, click the right button, the spouse's details do not appear. Now this looks complex, and it is a complex document, but because it's been designed around the business process of doing a statement of advice, a financial advisor is being led through their own process. The terminology is what they understand, and it's quite a simple process for them to go through. Me not being a financial advisor, I'd look at this and think, oh wow, this is a fair amount. But in the normal sense of doing work, it's quite fine. So I just wanted to give you that concept that an end user will see something that really is about their business process, and you can build those rules to be able to only show the information that needs to be shown. And you've seen radio buttons and drop-down lists that can make selection a lot easier and the process a lot easier, as opposed to people doing a lot of typing. Okay, there was one last thing I wanted to show you, and from a producer, and it's in a different instance of Intelledox. And this is around something that we were doing for another client. It was a simple process to be able to draw information out from a data set and produce a table as well as a simple graph. So this is what I'm calling it, a fake mortgage and loan portfolio risk report. So it's very much around being able to garner information from what you have in place and being able to present it in a format that can be then given to senior management or to share within a project team, or in fact it could be something that you want to send out to one of your customers. So again, I'm just going to use Michael's sample so that you don't have to watch me type. And we'll just briefly go through this. So there's an area where I can put in some static text. So it could be a rich text field where I can actually have dot points, or I can make things bold, so I could make big with bold. and I'm selecting this particular organisation's underwriting level. It can be higher, superior, excellent, so we'll just make it superior. That will bring in some content in connection with the superior level. I filled in some portfolio objectives. If I wanted to add another one, I can just simply add and say, what have we got there? To have money, enjoy life, play golf, for example. Action would be swim well, or swim slow probably. And the due date might be Christmas. And I just proceed on to the next. And this is where I'm going to define that I won't actually want to get information from either one of these data sources, assets, farm income, or XYZ, or a combination thereof. And I can just select by selecting the various data sources. So I will say assets. In farm income, I can then actually say, well, I don't want to look at all the information. I just want to look at the dairy and nuts information. So I can just untick those other selections, and that means it will not draw that information based on the business rules that we put in place. We'll just finish that, and we'll generate the document so that you can see what the output looks like. And this has not been designed as a complete output document. It's designed to show you what we've just done. So I'll just wait for that to load up for me. This is actually on a hosted web. I'm actually getting this from my local host, which at times can be a bit slow, as we can see. So you can see here that the output is here. I have a PDF document as well as a Word document. So we'll just open up the PDF document and have a look at that. And make it so that we can actually see it reasonably well. So we have a front page which has an image on it, the date that we're generating this particular document. I have a contents page, and we can just use the features of Word here to be able to automatically generate a contents page based on the template and information that's coming in. And you'll notice here that we've got samples of chart, a farm income table chart, and a table itself, and the asset table, which were those three areas that we selected. And as I go through the document, you'll see we've got phase credit culture is to be good, and I bolded that be good, and then has a current rating superior and a brief description of what that means. Again, I don't need to worry about that. That's been maintained within the content library and maintained from someone else. The portfolio objectives have been set out in a table format. And you'll see that I included the play good golf, which one day I hope to do. And then I have my tables and charts. So I have a farm income table, and it's only to do with dairy and nuts. It's quite a simple chart, and then I can look at having a chart which is comparing the sale of income farming between Q3 and Q4. And the last table was the asset table that I selected, so it gives me a representation of the information that I selected to get out of that particular data source. Okay. So what I wanted to do was to very briefly, and it will be brief looking at the time, I'm going to go into what we refer to as Infiniti Manage, and this is where we maintain users and their access controls. Two of the key areas with Infiniti Manage is what we call a content library. So in addition to creating a template, which probably is going to have information in it which is of what we would call a very low activity, that's unlikely to get changed or gets changed very rarely, there are clauses that the legal area may want to maintain. There are clauses that change, and it could be description of services, for example, that you want to reuse in your documentation. If you're sending out a statement of work, it could be a description of your services and or product offerings that you may want to release to your customers or potential customers on the types of services that you offer under certain circumstances. And the content library is where you do that. That is where you can maintain images, it's where you can maintain text, you can have document fragments included in. And all of these can be, based on the business rules that you would define, drawn on and used in a number of different wizards. But as soon as you make a change in the content library, it is then immediately available to anyone who's using a project that's going to use that particular content library item. This is normally an area where there's very few people who have access to it because you want to maintain that control, particularly to ensure that the accuracy of the data that you are that is going to be reused. So what you're trying to take away is people rewriting certain clauses or copying and pasting from a document which may be a few months or a year old, and therefore the actual clause itself is incorrect. And what you're really doing is mitigating the risk for errors to go out and then potential action from a customer or being held to account on something you don't want to be held to account on. The Infiniti Manage is also where we set up a connection link to data sources or various data sources from which to draw information. A lot of that now is centered around bringing in information from customer relation management systems so that you can very quickly and easily reuse information about your customers and your prospects or your key stakeholders, for example. It's also the ability to bring information from ERP systems and financial systems so that you can reuse information that is already in place instead of reinventing it or copying and pasting it or having to manually manipulate information, which increases the error of potential errors going out the door and increasing the risk to your organisation. So they're the two of the key areas apart from setting up users in the organisation. Infiniti Manage is typically what you would describe as the systems administration area of Infiniti. The fun area is design. So what you're seeing now is what we call Infiniti Design. This is where you actually do set up the look and feel and the types of questions and the business rules within within your system. So what I'm showing here is in fact the HR agreement or contract, the design for that, which you saw as the first particular process. So we have three pages, one that you don't see. The two main pages are who are the parties, and what we've done is actually laid these out. The parties is in the section in different columns, so we have the details of the employer, and then we have the information around the employee and the types of questions you're going to ask. So in Designer you have a layout area where you can create pages, sections and tabs. That helps you get the look and feel of how it's going to be presented to a staff member, or it could in fact be a customer via your website. It's how you set up that look and feel, the number of pages you're going to do, and it gives you the opportunity to really group information together or group questions together. The second area here, questions, are a number of different types of questions that you can ask. The most typical are user prompts, where you're asking a person to input information. Group logic type questions, where you're asking people to make a selection, and that selection could be one or it could be a multiple. And data source questions, where you're actually accessing a particular data source. As you can see in the second page here under terms of agreement, is that we've got a combination of user prompt questions to select a contract date. We have a group logic question, which is the full-time, part-time, casual, and then we have a tab set up to ask questions about where they're going to be employed. Then we have answers. Obviously, most questions need an answer. Some can be quite automatic, such as if you have a content library question, the answer actually is going to be that content library item to be brought into the place, and you will align it to the answer. Excuse me. So I'm just going to collapse that again. I'm going to show you what the statement of advice will look like. So I'll just open that from our database. Just to show you that on the more complex, there obviously are more pages and questions. Let's find that statement of advice. So you see in the statement of advice there are a number of different pages. As I said, there are pages that will have conditions on them. You can apply a condition on pages so that you can see them, you will see them, or you won't see them based on how something has been answered. But within these various pages, it's very similar. You have different types of question sets. And in the client details, for example, very similar. We have a bunch of user prompt questions to gather information, and we have some auto logic questions as well. So this really is representing the business process at the end of the day. So they can be quite complex, as you can see here, or they can be quite simple. It depends on the business process and the output. And we're just going to have a bit of fun back with that HR employment contract. I'll just show you in connection with making changes to a particular project how simple it can be, and also applying a simple condition. So we're going to add a new page to this, and we'll actually put it in an appropriate place. So we'll have a new page. We'll call it Michael's page because I lack imagination. And within Michael's page, we're going to ask a question. So I want to ask a group logic question. It's going to have more than one answer. So I just drag that onto the page. And the question we're going to ask is, do you own a pet? And obviously, that question is going to have two answers, either yes or no. So we'll have yes. So we'll just make one answer yes. And we'll add an answer to this question. And it will be no. So going back to the question itself and its properties, I can define that it's going to be a multiple choice, a drop-down list, or a multiple select. I don't really want it to be multiple select. You know, it can't have yes and no, so we'll make it a multiple choice question. And I'm actually going to say that the default value is going to be yes. Now what that means is that every time I see the question, it will have defaulted a selection to yes. This is often good where you know that in a large percentage of the time a particular question is going to return a particular answer, and it just saves end user time. It doesn't save time for the person who wants to select another answer, but if you've got something that's 70% or even 65% or above is being answered the same way, it's a way just to save a little bit of time to actually make the default value yes. So do I own a pet? Then we might have a second question that says what type of pet. So again, it's going to be a multiple answer. Pet to own. And then I can have dog. Always seems to be fairly popular. And then I could then add another one which might be cat, and another one which might be fish, another one which might be, I don't know, T-Rex. So this is hopefully giving you an indication of how you can easily add questions, how you can set up the answers for them. And then I might have a user prompt question as the last question on this page is, what is T-Rex name? And this is a user prompt question, so I can actually start to set up certain validations and say, well, the data type can be text or it can be a date format, which will automatically include a date picker, or it has to be a number format. So this is where you can start to assist end users to ensure that they are entering the right information. So we're just going to leave this as text. Now, obviously in this type of process, you're going to ask certain questions based on answers. So this is where you want to start to set up conditions. So we're just going to set up a couple of conditions. So we'll have, do you own a pet? Obviously, what type of pet you own, the condition will be, really you're only going to show that question if I answered yes. So I can just pull the answer yes from do you own a pet, and that's now set a condition. And for what is T-Rex name, the condition of seeing that question should only be when I actually answer T-Rex. So I'll just save that now, and we'll actually go back to Infiniti Produce, and we'll go back and find the HR contract and keep my fingers crossed that all those changes have taken effect. So you notice now that there is Michael's page, and if I click to Michael's page, ignoring everything else, we have do you own a pet? Yes, and it defaulted to yes, so what type of pet do you own is being shown. If I change that to no, that question now is removed. So it really is focusing in on saying or setting up a system to only see those type of the questions you need to see. So we say yes, and if I say actually have T-Rex, I can then enter T-Rex's name.
And Michael, if you give this up like 2 minutes.
Yep, I'm just about done. So I'll just throw design up again. So design really is the fun bit. This is where you take your business process and you start to design out in accordance with your business process, the business rules. That can be conditions. We can assign validation against fields so that if someone's entering in an email address, it has to be entered in a particular format. And even through the use of regular expressions, you can ensure that it's not a Hotmail account or a Yahoo account. Once it's done, and obviously like any system, the initial design of templates and the design of your question sets takes time. But once it's done, to make changes is very simple. As you can see, even setting up a condition, I didn't write any code. It was a drag and drop functionality. That's the way we've designed it to be. I am not technical by any stretch of the imagination. I'm certainly not a code cutter, but I can design quite complex forms or bring quite complex business processes in and set them up in Intelledox to produce an output.
Thank you.